But that's
Right.
what's so impressive about like not just world champions, but defending world champions, man, in any sport.
Yeah.
But it's like the fact that you know that they have fought or competed a lesser version of themselves, and I've still got it done, you know?
That's such a cool perspective that I've never even quite thought of. Is when you're watching these people walk out, you think, okay, this is an athlete at the very top of their level, and it is. But like you're saying, you don't know how they're feeling though, because it's like everybody wakes up some days and there's something it's like, I'm not 100% today. And it's very rare that you wake up feeling 100%. Those are great days. You'd probably pray that happens on a fight day, but the chances of that are so low. So it's like getting used to just bringing your best all the time is the crazy part.
And you have no idea what this guy is going through, right? And then you could see a guy like, even take a guy like, I don't know, Anderson Silva or George St. Pierre or whatever. Right? Like these guys have had like less than stellar fights, right? And then like the whole crowd boos or whatever. But you have no idea what that guy's going through, and especially like a guy like Anderson who's had like spectacular knockouts and he has a bad fight, but like, yeah, man, he could have went in there with a blown out knee and flew and divorced his wife a month before, like you
don't know. When you're the one in the arena, none of that noise matters.
Yeah.
None of that noise matters. Christien Savoie, also known as the Tiger, is a professional MMA fighter from St. John, New Brunswick. And he started his martial arts journey at the age of 6, with Taekwondo earning his black belt by the time he was 10. That's crazy. He eventually transitioned to mixed martial arts, MMA, and has since built a strong reputation as a welterweight fighter. Christien is known for his success in regional promotions like Elite One MMA and Fighter League Atlantic, where he held championship titles. Recently competed on Dana White's Contender Series and is a notable figure in the Canadian MMA and known for his resilience and impressive record of 10-2-1, and 7 of those wins were by KO. Christien, I am super pumped to get into this conversation with you, man. And,
thank you, brother.
And that's your intro, but I want to open up with a statement from somebody that knows you very, very well. And I thought this would be a very powerful way to get into this, to set the tone. So this is somebody who speaks very highly of you, and this is a message from Tim Hayes. He says, I watched him grow up and develop over the last 12 years, not only as a fighter, but as a person and a man. As a fighter, he did absolutely everything he could to be the best that he could be. He found the best coaches he could possibly work with, even if he had to travel to different cities, and always gave 100%, even when he didn't want to. As a person, I am honored to know him. He does what he says and says what he does. He is one of the few people that I know that will continually stand up for what he believes, even if he's standing alone. He's also one of the few people I know that when he talks, I can absolutely believe every word coming out of his mouth. What a powerful, powerful statement about somebody, dude.
Much love, Tim. Thank you for the kind words.
So, Christien, what's been going on lately, man? How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, brother. Yeah, all that's been going on lately is getting swole, skipping leg day.
Skipping leg day.
Because of the knee injury. We'll get into that. But yeah, man, I've just been doing a lot of rehab for my leg. And while I'm there, I'm doing a lot of like upper body stuff right now. And yeah, man, doing what I can under the circumstances that I'm currently under.
100%. So you don't skip a beat at all then? There's no kind of time off after a fight?
Usually not, man. It depends how banged up I am, right? Luckily, I mean, every fight's different, right? This time I have no hand injury or anything like that, so I can do everything in my upper body, so.
Nice.
Yeah, man, it's just, some people like to drink, some people like to do different things. I like to be in the gym, so yeah.
100%, man. Well, that's a great spot to be. And it's funny, I was just talking to somebody about this, about how you kind of transition. I don't know about you, but I grew up kind of in the party scene a little bit. I was a very social guy. And then eventually you get to a point where it's like, that's not sustainable. That's not a good lifestyle to have, waking up, feeling miserable every single day. And it's like, once you start to work on that self-improvement, going to the gym, the mindset stuff, just kind of aligning yourself, like that's an addictive thing too. And that's a very fun thing to get involved in. But you've been doing this, like, this is your life though. Like, so you started Taekwondo at 6 years old.
Yes, sir.
Who got you into Taekwondo? Why'd you start there?
So I'm pretty sure what happened. It was either Bloodsport by Jean-Claude Van Damme,
okay,
or Jackie Chan movie. One of those two. And I asked my dad to put me in karate, and he put me in Taekwondo. So that's kind of where it started.
Cool, man. Cool. So then it was being inspired from something you've seen. So you've seen that at a young age, and that just clicked with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And I think, my childhood and stuff, that we'll probably get into, definitely geared me towards some sort of combat art.
Yeah. Even at 6.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
But I'm grateful for it, man. It has given me something to focus on practically my whole life, So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got your black belt by the age of 10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that normal to be 10 years old and have a black belt? Like, you must have been, like, was there a lot of other 6-year-olds that had, was there a lot of other 10-year-olds that had black belts?
You know what, man? Unfortunately, I would say that there are, but it depends on the academy.
Okay.
And what I mean is, like, there's like martial arts / good fight gyms, then there's like businesses. And what I mean is, like, like every time a kid gets a promotion, that's money in the bank for the martial arts instructor, right? So that's why I'm saying it. It depends where you're at, But that said, I was legit. I won the maritime championships 3 years in a row. I forget what age I was, but I'm pretty sure it was like 8, 9, 10. So I was good.
Yeah, you were good, and then probably getting that feel for being good at it probably helped stick with it too, and then helped wanting to develop that. So then after the black belt, you got into the MMA aspect when?
So it was after like nationals and Taekwondo, and it was around that time I was like preteen, and honestly, I went through like a lazy phase of my life. And I just kind of lost interest in Taekwondo, and I barely trained, man, for nationals. And anyways, I got beat there, and I don't know, man. Yeah, again, I just kind of lost interest, and I was just kind of like a preteen. I went through this phase of my life. I was just like a chubby, kind of lazy preteen watching cartoons and whatever. And yeah, and it was actually the first time I watched a UFC fight was at my uncle's place. I remember until this day, and I was about 13-ish.
Yes.
And,
do you remember who was fighting?
Yeah, Matt Hughes against Carlos Newton too.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And anyways, I watched that, and I was just like in awe. And I just remember thinking, like, I want to do this, and where can I do it ASAP? And so it took a while, and Dad and I would wrestle around the basement. He's like my original training partner, and we used to go to war, man. And then eventually I found the gym called Okuden Fight Club. Britt Nickerson, shout out to Britt Nickerson, who's like my OG MMA coach, still around these days. And that's kind of where it started when I was like 14.
Okay. So your dad was like your OG trainer kind of deal. That's super cool to hear, man. That is super, super cool. So then seeing the fights on the UFC and then knowing that was kind of your calling. Yeah, man. So tell me a bit more about like seeing the fights on the UFC and then just being like, that's what I'm going to do. Like how did you, so here's my perspective from you, Christian. Like, I remember growing up, man, and seeing, cause you got into boxing for a while too, right? Mm-hmm. I remember one day going to, on the east side by the horse racing track, going to a boxing match, and I think you were there fighting, and you were this was probably like 10 years ago, man. Does that sound right?
Yep.
And
if you caught that, that's my one and only amateur boxing match.
Man, I was there. I seen that. I seen that live, and I think you were fighting somebody significantly older than you, weren't you?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think you knocked him up real bad.
I didn't like knock him out bad.
But like you knocked him around though.
Yeah. I busted him off. Yeah. He was like a boxing coach or something in Ormukto, and backstory is, again, I take no offense to it now. It's just funny, but I guess he was like kind of like chirping, saying like, "Oh, he's an MMA guy getting into the boxing ring," and I tuned him up.
Yeah, you did, because so my memory of that, I was there with a buddy of mine, and he ended up going to the bathroom after your fight, and the guy that you were fighting was in the bathroom with him, and he was talking to him for a sec, and that guy said he didn't remember what happened. Oh. He's like, I don't actually remember what happened in there. And I think he was like, obviously, like, my buddy's being cordial, like, hey man, like, you know, that was good. Like, I don't know what else you say to someone like that, right? In that moment. And then he was just like, I don't remember what happened in there. So like, yeah, I think you gave him quite a knocking. And that was the first time that your name actually like stuck and rung in my head, because I was like, who is this? I think like, because you're 1 year older than me. How old are you? 32?
32. Yep.
32. So I'm 31. Yeah. So you're just a year older. I think that guy that you were fighting was significantly older than you too. Like probably by 5 years or so, especially when you're probably. Like, when you're 19 fighting someone that's 25, like that's a big gap, right? And the fact that he did that, I was like, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
And then your name's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger since.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I actually think that I was supposed to fight somebody else, and this guy kind of like he might have been fighting somebody else on the card too. Then like his opponent dropped out, so we just but yeah,
yeah,
we ended up fighting each other. Yeah.
So I want to ask. So coming from St. John, because there's not a lot of top tier athletes coming out of St. John, right? Especially the way that you did. What are some challenges that you found growing up in St. John, finding top level facilities to train at to get to where you want to be? Like you said, you've seen the MMA on TV and kind of knew you wanted to go there. So then what was that journey like, kind of finding the right training for you? Because that's probably been a big part of your journey, is learning how to become better and better. So what's that looked like coming from St. John?
So being in a small town, man, has its pros and cons. The cons are, obviously, I'm not at a big gym surrounded by other pro fighters, and just being around that environment. The pros are that I got a lot of individual attention here.
Right.
And financially it was a lot easier. And yeah, man, I just kind of like seeked out like the best guys in the area, and within here in Fredericton, and yeah, man, I got a ton of individual attention. And what I've always kind of done is that like a lot of people, man, I think they think of me like I've never left St. John, which isn't true.
Right.
Like I've trained at a lot of the best gyms in the world.
Well, like Tim was just saying, right? Like finding other cities to train in if you had to, kind of deal. Yeah.
And what I've always done is like, I go to big gyms, I see the holes in my game, and I come back home and I talk to my coaches and my training partners, and now we can triple down on what does Christien need? You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's how, like, at the end of the day, man, in my perspective is like, you gotta make do out of the cards that you're dealt, and I've always kind of had that, objective mindset, I guess. So that's what I would do, man, is like, I would get the looks from these big gyms, train with a lot of the best guys in the world. Yeah. What are the significant things? Like, what are the things that I'm doing wrong? Then come back here, tell my coaches, work on those things, then go back, So that's kind of how I've always done things. And I know it works for me is because I'll go there the second time per se. Yeah. And the same guys who are catching me with certain moves or whatever can't. So I always knew that what I was doing at home, like the system that I have going on, works,
100%. Man, there's so many things I want to ask you. So, like, even in that, you can just hear the drive in you, right? The constant need to want to improve and find new ways to improve yourself. Have you always had that?
Yeah, man. I'm not ashamed to say it. Like I'm just obsessed, bro.
100%. Yeah, man. There should be absolutely no shame in that. That's like, a gift, man. It's a gift.
My girlfriend will tell you, dude. Like I literally like my living room is like my office, and I watch fights all the time, and I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
And now what I've been doing the past year, whatever, is that I film a lot of my training sessions. I break my stuff down. I write notes. Like I'm like a mad scientist. You know?
I love it,
like
man.
A lot of people probably like, you know, I don't know. I guess it's like the typical like narrative of fighters is like, you know, we're just big meatheads, and there are a lot of guys that are like that. Don't get me wrong. I've been around a lot of fighters.
Right.
But yeah, man, I'm like I said, I'm like a mad scientist of this game. So
well, getting to the level that you've gotten to, that makes sense. Like hearing the passion and even how you're studying it and studying yourself in a way. It's like actually, do you want to hear a cool story that I heard from one of the greatest hockey players? So I had a chance to meet Walter Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky's dad.
Okay, cool.
When I was really young, and it was a weird scenario where my grandmother, she worked for the CNIBC, and Walter was coming to St. John for a golfing event, and so she had to drive him from St. John to Moncton to his airport, or to his flight in Moncton for whatever reason. That's the way they arranged it, and she asked if I could come along. And I was really young at the time, but I got to talk to him, and I heard from him the way that Wayne Gretzky would watch hockey. So he did something similar to what you do. He would sit there with the clipboard, and when he was really young, he watched professional hockey, and he had the rink on a clipboard, and he would make an X by every spot the puck was shot, and he like drew where the puck was going. So where the puck mostly was a shaded dark area, and then where it shot from was an X. So then he found ways to go where the puck is always at, but then shoot from spots that the puck isn't normally shot from. Yeah. And it's like that level of studying is what helps you get to, like when people are wondering like, you know, oh, how did he do so well? It's like there's so much behind the scenes that people aren't seeing, right?
100%.
So much behind the scenes. And so that's just talking about the kind of the studying and the mentality, but then there's the training aspect of it too. Mm-hmm. You hit in the gym, the relentless hours of training, of coaching, of hitting the pads, of doing all that stuff, of rolling on the mat. What's that like for you? Like, what is that training look like? And it's probably not ideal in some situations because I've been following your journey for a long time, and sometimes things are thrown at you last minute, and sometimes you're training for a huge fight that doesn't end up happening, right?
Yeah.
So what's some of that kind of training like? Like what? And that's got to be kind of a lot in the head too, especially when you think there's a fight coming up, you're getting amped right up for it, and then something falls through. Like, because I've been following your journey, and it's like there's gotta be frustrations in that. But how do you keep yourself dialed in when all this stuff's going on?
Keep myself dialed in, man. Again, I'm just kind of obsessed with it, and yeah, man. Like, there's no debate about it, but that it's been one heck of a journey, and you know, as you've mentioned, I've had a ton of canceled fights, and you know, to put in perspective, like I've only ever pulled out of one of my pro fights, and I actually like. It's just a crazy situation, man. It was like a couple days before the fight, I woke up with vertigo. I don't know if you ever heard of vertigo.
Yeah. So that's like a dizziness, right?
Yeah. It felt like you're literally like coming out of the gravitron the whole time.
Right.
And I still tried to fight. Like I tried to like hide it from the commission and like, you know, but eventually I basically had to pull out, man. Like I would have been an idiot to step in there. But this was literally like 10 years ago.
Wow, okay.
So that gives you perspective, like, you know, what kind of fighter that I am. But
right.
But every other canceled fight and stuff has either been opponent or event, you know. And how you keep dialed in, man, is just like, unfortunately, dude, like I think a lot of people think like, oh, like the thing I hear all the time is like, oh, you gotta get out of the Maritimes, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this. It's like, bro, like I have friends around the world in this industry, you know, and it happens everywhere, man, in the fight game, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Just, you know, well, one, it's
I mean, it
fighting,
even happens at the highest level, right?
Yeah,
on like UFC and stuff. You'll be right amped up for a card, and then like last minute there's an issue. Like happens at the highest level, even when people are getting, like it happens all over, right?
It's fighting, right? So at the end of the day, you know, guys are gonna get hurt, right? You know, I'd like to think that I've got a pretty good system going on, you know. But at the end of the day, man, like, you know, like a lot of these guys, like I think a lot of guys like train like meatheads still, and that's why they're getting hurt. But at the end of the day, man, again, it's fighting. You can try to be as safe as possible, but things will still happen, you know. Luckily, I've been pretty solid as far as not having to pull out from fights from injuries, but yeah.
I got a really interesting question for you. Let's go all the way back for a second to your first cage fight. Do you remember what was going through your head before and after that?
Before, I'm sure that I was nervous as heck, like I always am. Like I'm not one of these guys who will tell you like I'm not afraid, you know? Every single time I fight, bro, is like, what the heck am I doing?
Right.
I always go through these demons in this process. But the only thing that changes with experience is that I know this process. As in like, oh yeah, you know, it's another fight. I'm gonna go through these emotions, you know, and it's like it's almost like you accept what is, you know?
I love that,
man. Yeah.
I love that. So then that's the before. What was the after like? The first time. What was the feeling you had after the fight? Was it what you expected?
Yeah. There's only 2 fights I ever like cried afterwards, like out of like happiness.
Right.
And it was that fight, my first amateur fight, right? Just bawled my face off. Just like, over. Because again, and me as, you know, I was 19 when I had my first fight. And again, man, I was just like a fanboy and like, you know, like, I just dreamed of being an MMA fighter, right? So yeah, it was that. Then after my first pro fight, which, you know, my first pro fight, and it was like a war between me and Buddy. Like it was
that in Moncton?
Halifax.
Halifax, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Because I've been to a couple of your fights in Moncton too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you said you have that feeling of like, what am I doing? What the hell am I doing? When does that creep up? And does it go away at any point before you walk in the ring?
Man, I can just recall some fights where I'm literally like all the way up until they say like, you ready to go? Like I'm thinking in my head like, man, like I might get knocked out here in front of my friends and family, and like, the fuck am I doing, you know?
Yeah, man.
But that said, once it starts, all those thoughts go away. I'm just
100%. You have to be in the zone.
I'm fighting a man, right? So I'm like tunnel visioned, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had so many moments, man, where like, you know, again, like since you asking me, like I'm like reminiscing, and I can think of like times I like walk in the cage. I'm like, man, is this real life? Like, is this actually happening right now? You know?
Yeah.
it's crazy, bro. It's like nobody will ever understand unless you've been there.
You look so confident when you walk out too. I've seen a lot of your walkouts, and you look like you have the most amount of confidence in yourself. Like, and that's obviously with a lot of preparation coming in, right? So I don't know if you feel that way when you're walking out. The way I see it as a viewer, I'm like, he looks dialed in.
Yeah, and
looks
don't
ready
get me wrong,
for war.
I am confident, right?
Right.
I believe in my skill set, and you know, I believe I can beat anybody in the world. You know, I have that mindset. However, I recognize what I'm doing, and I always go into a fight giving my opponent the respect, and not even just my opponent, right? Like as in like any man with 4-ounce gloves can touch you on the chin and put you to sleep, right? So I'm always aware of that, you know?
Right. The 4-ounce gloves. This is something. So I'm no expert in any of this, but the 4-ounce gloves, that's the standard UFC gloves, right?
Yep.
And then like, what does a boxing glove weigh? Those are about 10 ounce?
Professional boxing, I don't know if it's 8 or 10, but it might be
somewhere around there. Yeah. Because they got way more padding on them.
Yeah.
And you fought with boxing gloves and the UFC as well.
I haven't fought pro boxing, so the amateur gloves in boxing are a little thicker.
Okay.
But again, I don't know those numbers.
Did you find I'm not sure if you'd even notice this, but with the just slightly larger gloves, does that play into a factor of like shoulder stamina, anything like that? Or is that just, you're probably so filled with adrenaline that you don't even notice that little bit of extra weight?
It definitely, like, big gloves versus small gloves, man, is totally different, right?
Okay.
And that's why, like, you know, like with MMA, it's so different, right? Because you could be the best boxer, if you're not used to having those little gloves, man, it's totally, like, to give you like perspective, like if I have 16-ounce boxing gloves on, I'm pretty safe here, right? As in, like, I got this big padding, I can stay here like like the Mike Tyson peekaboo, but I'm pretty safe here, right? With the MMA gloves, man, as soon as you, like, even when I'm sparring and I'm transitioning from big gloves to small gloves, I'm like, oh crap, like there's a level of, how would you put it, unprotection.
Right. Yeah. I got you. Okay.
That's why, like, in MMA, like, obviously things are different where you can grab and wrestle too, but yeah, like, I'm not a big fan of, like, fighting in the pocket in MMA per se, because in boxing, you can slip, and it's just totally different, man. 4-ounce gloves, that's what I mean. You get touched once and that could be it,
100%. And you've done that to a lot of people. Yeah. What is some of the biggest lessons you've learned from fighting, Christian? How about this? What's a lesson that's helped you the most to become a better fighter that you've learned? If there's something that you could pinpoint.
The best lesson to become a better fighter. I mean, top of my head, man, I think, at the end of the day, dude, it all comes down to, like, discipline, top of my head, like, but I think that applies to everything. How do you become the best real estate agent,
Yeah,
I imagine
100%.
there's a similar philosophy. I think to be great at anything that you choose to pursue, you need to have a certain level of extreme discipline,
Yeah, because there's always ways to improve.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. Like, a lot of people, man, think they're working hard, and don't get me wrong, like, a lot of people do work hard, right? Working a 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, that's hard.
Yeah.
But it's also like, that's the requirements of being an adult human,
I love it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like
bearing responsibility, taking on something. Yeah, absolutely.
But I find a lot of these,
or else you're going to get in trouble.
A lot of these people, man, just think like, well, I'm working hard and I deserve this and that.
That's not how it works.
No, it's not how it works, because there's a guy working 40 hours a week, and every other hour he's trying to perfect his craft, whether that's within the job he's working, or maybe he's working that job just to pay the bills so he can get to where he wants to be,
100%.
But yeah, there's a lot of...
There's always somebody working harder.
100%, dude.
Yeah.
And at the top of the food chain, right? In everything, right? It's those little things, and those little things become the big things,
Yeah. I got a quote that you might like, Christian. So I just got back from a conference from Nashville. And when I was there, one of the guest speakers, his name's Alan Stein Jr., and he was the mindset coach for Kobe Bryant and also some of the world's best basketball players.
Cool.
And he had a really cool story to talk about Kobe, and it kind of resonates with what you just said. He said that when he showed up to the LA Lakers training facility, Kobe was already one of the best basketball players in the world. He wanted to figure out what's making him the best. So he approaches him after one of the sessions and just says, "Kobe, would you mind if I watch you practice?" And he says, "Absolutely. You can come to the gym tomorrow." He says, "I'll be there at 4. And Alan looks at his calendar because he's kind of got the schedule there. He goes, "Well, there's something here at 3:30 p.m. Like, how are you going to be at the gym at 4? He goes, "No, 4 a.m. 4 a.m. So he's like, okay, perfect. So to show Kobe the respect he deserves, Alan shows up at 3:30. He wants to be there early. When he shows up, the gym lights are already on. The ball's dribbling, and he's in there, shoes squeaking. He's warming up for the practice.
Sick.
When he watches Kobe, when he's watching him, he says, he wasn't doing anything that I don't teach my high school students. Nothing he did was fancy. Nothing he did was anything that, he's like, I was expecting to see something magnificent. So I approached him after and I said, Kobe, you're the best basketball player in the world. What I seen during your warm-up and your practice, it wasn't anything spectacular. Like, what's the secret here? Kobe smiled at him and winked. He said, that's the difference between me and everybody else. I don't get bored with the basics. Mm-hmm. So it's like mastering the basics, right? So
100%.
So it's like what you're saying, right? Like just kind of getting good at the fundamentals, and that there's always somebody outworking you.
Yeah.
And it's like these people at the very top level, like warming up for the practice. And I just love that you said that, because it reminds me of that kind of mindset, right? And it's like that's the mindset that you have to have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how you, well, I guess, explain what he said, but how basics, bro, and that's what I like. I coach a little bit now, I got one guy specifically like under my wing. He's fighting now, and but that's something I always like try to preach to him and like guys that I'm like, I guess bringing up, is that like basics, bro. Like, and I think that applies across the board,
100%,
sport or anything. But
a lot of this stuff is transferable for sure.
And like, to give perspective, like, I see guys at gyms, and they're throwing these crazy 8-10 punch combinations and kicks, and like, looks cool, looks flashy, but I'll like spar with these guys and it's just like boom, 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 and I can just shut their shit down with a basic jab.
Right. That's the Mike Tyson quote.
Yeah. And
everybody's got to play until they get punched in the face.
But you see a lot of the best fighters in the world, and athletes. But I'm going to use fighter analogy because I'm 100%. A fighter.
Yep.
But like you look at take George St. Pierre, for example.
Yes.
Right? He's got an amazing jab. He's got an amazing double leg. Everybody knows these things are coming. Nobody could stop him. Right? Khabib, right? What's he gonna do? He's gonna get you up against the cage. He shoots like a low single, gets you up against the cage, works you there, right?
Yeah, he just turns into like an anaconda.
Yeah, but nobody can stop him, right? So a lot of the best fighters in the world, you know exactly what they're gonna do. You just can't stop them, because their basics are advanced.
And that's such a hard thing to digest, I think, for a lot of people too, because everybody's thinking, what do I need to do? What's the secret? What's the secret? Everybody's looking for a secret for something. Yeah. And like you said, it's just putting in that consistent work. There's always somebody that's going to be outworking you. And it's like somebody can do the basics better, then they're automatically better.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
Man.
For sure.
Who are some of your favorite fighters, Christian? Who are some fighters that you look up to? And it might not even have to be MMA per se. Like, is there certain influential fighters that inspired you to change your style up at all?
Yeah. Like I'm like thinking of like I was a huge Crow Cop fan growing up.
That was a dangerous dude.
Yeah. But now, what I do a lot now, man, is I watch a lot of guys who like I feel like have like similar body types and kind of styles that I have, right? Because like, for example, like take Israel Adesanya, right? I love Israel Adesanya. I can watch him fight, but I'm not 6'4" and can move the way that he does, right? Alex Pereira, right? Like phenomenal fighter, right? But again, like these guys have figured out what are their body types, what works best for them, right? So yeah, and put in perspective, like I really like watching Rob Whittaker because I feel like him and I, similar kind of body types, similar kind of styles. And funny enough, I was actually like decently good friends with Rob before he got when he was in the UFC, before he actually went to middleweight. But like, yeah, him and I used to like hang out, go to lunch and play video games and stuff. And
that's wild.
And, it's crazy, man. Just cause like 10 years later, like he's actually like probably my favorite fighter to watch, But,
that's cool. And that must be really fun when you're cheering on somebody too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, man, it's the same. Like, I know you and I are just getting to know each other even more right now, and but I've watched a lot of your fights, and like just the fact that you're from St. John, you know, like it's like it is so cool to see you up there and putting everything on the line and following your craft and your passion too. Like that's so powerful. And you are inspiring a lot of people from St. John too. Like I was at the gym the other day and I was talking to a young fella who wants to be an Olympic boxer. And like, I could just tell, I was sitting in the sauna. This guy is like 19 years old. You can just like tell when somebody's got like they're just filled with piss and vinegar, right? That is filled. And he kind of had a military cut. I was like, is this guy like military or something? And I asked him and he's like, no, I'm a boxer. I've been a boxer since he was like, I don't know. He said like 6 or 7 or something. Okay. And I said, so then like, I'm just thinking like local people, fighters. And I asked, I said, do you know Christian Savoie? He's like, yeah, I've watched some of his fights and stuff too. So it's like, you're influencing the local and probably beyond local kind of fighter population, which is incredible, man. And it's like, how does that make you feel from St. John? Like, is that ever something that you thought would happen, or is that just a byproduct of what you wanted to do?
That's what I hoped, someday. Like being a guy, like I grew up, so like when we're talking about favorite fighters, the guy that I should have mentioned was Ryan Jimmo.
Yes, from St. John.
Yeah. And he was like my idol growing up, bro. Like, he was a guy from St. John. He was an MMA fighter. And yeah, I remember like running into him. Like I can specifically remember like running into him at the mall when I was young and like just being like starstruck and be like, hey, Ryan. And, like and it being like a little awkward. But yeah, man, that said, it's cool, and I'm honored to be in that position, I guess. And that's why I think it's also really important for me to carry myself in a certain way. And but it's, it's something that I really cherish, man. And, I got a ton of messages ahead of this fight and stuff. And
no doubt, yeah.
It's definitely bittersweet, right? The fact that I didn't get the job done, but that said, I hope that I at least inspired, some of these young guys growing up that, like, doesn't matter where you're from, man,
Yeah.
like
yeah, let's talk about that a little bit if you want. The how did you find it was different going to the UFC Contender Series from any other fights that you were prepping for? Like, what did it look like on a professional business level behind the scenes? Was it significantly different than anything you're used to here?
Yes and no. Honestly, man, the biggest work was like I had so much paperwork I had to do, man.
Okay.
It was ridiculous, dude. I probably signed my whole life away. I don't know. It's just like so much paperwork things I had to do.
Did you have anybody to walk you through it, or did they just throw it at you?
No, they just threw it at me.
Oh, lovely.
I trust my management.
Right, right. Yeah.
So, like he's got all kinds of UFC guys, so. But that said, yeah, so there's just all kinds of paperwork I had to do, man, all kinds of like medicals I have to do.
Yeah.
And being here in Canada, right, it's not like the US. So in the US, you can just go anywhere and get an MRI, for example, or EKG.
Right.
Here, man, I had to pull a bunch of strings. Luckily, I know like a local doctor who really helped me out and getting these things done. But yeah, dude, I was just like between training and appointments and paperwork, man.
Yeah.
It was a process, yeah.
Right. So then even when you get there, how much training are you doing like when you arrive to Vegas? Like is that kind of like, is there when I'm running a marathon, there's a taper period right before the marathon. You want to wind down a little bit. And this kind of gets going with what we were talking about right before we got going on the air about adrenals. Mm-hmm. So do you kind of like taper a little bit going into the fight? And if it's something you can't talk about, let me know.
No.
Yeah.
I've actually like, again, I've had over 15 cage fights, I think now.
Okay.
But it's been a lot of trial and error, and but something I've learned, man, is that like, so for us in our sport, typically most guys cut a lot of weight, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this process. But,
so the weight cut leading up to the weigh-in, and then is it like about a day afterwards?
Yeah.
So some guys can drop like 10 pounds or something. Like I've read some crazy stuff on like, what is going on? Guys walking just near death. Weighing in.
Yeah. So I cut a lot more than 10 pounds. Let's put it that way.
Holy crow, man. Wow.
But what I was going to say, so the, with us cutting weight, like what I've recognized is that like in the past, I would train hard all the way up to the fight, or, you know, at least a couple days before, whatever. But like, you know, if you're getting ready for a marathon or whatever, right? Well, like you don't have to cut weight. So like,
right.
So you know, like at least as I don't know the process, I'm not gonna pretend like I do. But I imagine you taper out. I don't know, like
a week or two.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but in my sport, where like fight week isn't like a recovery week, you know what I mean? Like we're literally starving and dehydrating ourselves to near death,
going
right?
into the weigh-in,
exactly.
I guess.
So I used to train I would train hard all the way up to like, you know, fight week, maybe even like a couple days out, and then it, you know, I realized like by the time I got to the fight, I felt like a bag of crap. And, but I made the connection, I guess, that you know, like fight week again isn't a recovery week. It's not like I'm like eating, relaxing, recovering.
Because
right?
I guess you can't, right? Because the weigh-in. I forgot about the weigh-in.
Exactly. So I try to taper out, like I try to taper out like a week and a half out. You know, that's kind of what I do now. But I know some guys, man, who still, you know, they cut weight and everything and they train hard pretty much up to weigh-ins, you know. So I do think it's a subjective thing, and you got to figure out what works for you.
You have to know your body for sure. That's another probably very interesting part about what you do. Like you must know your body in and out, how it works being dehydrated, how it works being tired, being able to push, how far you can push, pushing past points that you probably didn't even think you could push.
Yeah. yeah. I got a lot of experience there, man.
Yeah.
A lot of experience there. Yeah.
Was there ever a weigh-in that like, that was just maybe came last minute, or that just maybe like what's that cutting process like? Like, are you exhausted when you're going up there? Because like, I can't imagine. Like, I'll sit in the sauna, Christian, for like 45 minutes, and I walk out of there and I'm like, oh, like just pounding water. But you'll go in there. I think I've seen you with like garbage bags on, hoodies, and you're skipping rope, or like just like cutting. And it's like, how? I mean, are you walking out and weighing like just completely dehydrated? Like, and then right after, then you can start eating, refuel like right after.
Exactly. Yeah. It's unfortunately part of my sport, man, and I call it necessary cheating. That's what I call it, because it's like, so I have fought at 185, which is a weight class above me, right? That I currently fight at, and which would be ideal for me, you know, like 185. Like, so I still gotta cut weight, but like, you know, like just to say it straight up, I seem to peak around like 190. Like that seems to be like my physical like peak, you know?
Yeah.
But that said, say I fought at 185, so I cut 5 pounds or whatever, right? I'm fighting guys who, you know, walk around at 220, 6'3", and are probably, you know, minimum 205 in there, you know? But like I fought a guy, in my comeback fight at 185, and I honestly just did that fight because I was too fat to make 170. This is after 2 years off.
Right,
that's a whole other story. But anyways, I came back.
I want to touch on that because I seen you were doing some lobster fishing.
Yeah.
I kind of want to ask you about that too.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah. But yeah, and I fought at 185, and I fought like this top prospect in the country, and man, like that guy had to be like, man, 215 in there, you know? Damn. So like, and that's what's hard, like, especially in like MMA with the wrestling, right? Because once you're around 200 pounds, man, like, don't get me wrong, like the bigger you are, still the harder you hit, all in all.
Right.
But everybody can knock anybody out once you're a big man, but the wrestling, bro. Right. When a man's got 20 pounds on you, makes a big difference.
100%. 100%. So then that's almost an advantage that some people will use, right? Going in there, cut a bunch of weight. And I can't imagine, how does anybody pack on, let's say, like what's a significant jump? Let's say from weigh in to fight, 24 hours?
Yeah.
And then like people are putting on, is it possible to put on 10 pounds in 24 hours?
Bro,
is that possible?
So I'm typically about 190 in there.
And then then you're going in and weighing in at 170. 70? You put on 20 pounds?
Yeah. And what's crazy,
Are you
man,
eating just nonstop after?
So there's just a lot behind it, right?
Yeah,
like there's
that's so wild.
Yeah.
What a crazy transformation for the body to go through.
Yeah, there's a whole like water loading period. Like there's all kinds of things that you got to do to make weight, right? Like the most intelligent way possible, the safest way possible. Yeah. Right? And I've kind of got it dialed in now, and I've got a guy who helps me out. But yeah, man. So I'm typically about $190 in there, and that's where I feel best. But there's guys even bigger than me, man, at 170. You know, like I checked these. Excuse me. Yeah. Sometimes the commission will post like UFC fighters like weights the day of the fight.
Yeah.
And I like there's a couple guys I fought at 170. In the UFC, like one guy was 200, the other guy was 198, you know. So that's what I mean. There's guys that are even bigger than me, you know. And I'm probably considered like a bigger welterweight. But like I said, there's guys even bigger than me, you know.
Damn, man, damn. So that's a whole other kind of like aspect to it too. Going in 24 hours, there's so much to it. There's so much to the process. And man, like, I've gotten emotional before watching UFC fights because like you're like people, and this is what I admire about what you do, man. You're putting it all on the line in there. You're building up months of training for this blink moment, and it's you versus another human, and then there's just a ref in between. That's the coolest part. Is like you're going in there completely just my skill versus your skill, and it is so admirable. It is such an admirable thing to watch. And then when people are emotional afterwards, just like with joy, I've caught myself getting emotional. Like, it's like, you just feel it. It is so raw, man. And I think that's why it's so entertaining too. I think that's why it's so entertaining is the rawness of it. It's like going back to the gladiator days, right? Like, it's like the fact that it's entertainment is crazy. The fact that there's still people that do it is crazy, and you're going against other people like, you know, it's not like you're going in there against other people that want to beat you.
I can't imagine a drug that could be more potent than fighting a man in a cage. You know?
No doubt.
And that said, like there's guys in the UFC, actually Jared Gordon, he's very open about like his drug problem in the past, but he was actually a buddy of mine, and he's a pretty big name in the UFC right now. But yeah, man, like what I'm getting at with him is that like there's guys who have like transitioned from like, you know, like being drug addicts to fighting because like that, you know,
right.
There's nothing like it,
right? Because that dopamine rush of getting in there, and then even just the gym and stuff too. Like a lot of the drug addiction will come from maybe a lack of purpose kind of deal, right? And then people can have an addictive personality, and that can be a downfall. But if you can spin that into a positive aspect and turn that ship around and focus on something and put that addiction, like you said, into working out, feeling good, well, now all of a sudden you're a weapon.
And that's me, bro. And I know I speak for a lot of people, right? But that's me. I've got an extremely addictive personality, right? Like if I go off on the junk food, bro, like I like
right, all in on everything kind of deal.
And,
all in on everything.
And I have friends of mine, you know, guys I grew up with and whatever, and you know who I won't mention, obviously, but like they have what I have. I can tell, right? Whatever you want to call it, addictive personality, super ADHD. But you know, like I know some guys who just like, man, they hit the booze, they get super fat.
It's dangerous,
you know what I mean? Like they like. But that said, I've seen sides of them like, man, when they channel it, you know, they have that ability to be great at something, right? Mm-hmm. But that's when you're cut from that cloth per se, you almost got to make a decision every day, man. Like, what are you going to obsess over?
100%. It's a gift and a curse at the same time, 100%. Right? 100%. It's a gift and a curse. And I mean, you know, I loved drinking growing up, and it's like, I'm a little bit, and I feel like I have like a bit of the all in kind of mentality, and it's like you got to be very careful with that, especially when you're around bad vices. Somewhere like Vegas, you know, like that place is just filled with vices.
Yeah, man.
That's a dangerous, dangerous spot. It's wild that they have so many big UFC events there, but obviously you guys are so disciplined. Get so much going on, like we were talking about earlier, that when you show up, you don't even have time to enjoy the city you're in. You're kind of going through.
Side note on that topic, I actually had to do a criminal record check for this fight, fingerprints and everything. But my theory behind that is, and I know this has happened, but like, you know, guys in the UFC have gone to Vegas and, you know, like caused the scene.
Right.
And I think they're aware of that, right? So they want to make sure that, you know, guys representing the UFC aren't going to go, you know, ham and mess things up in Vegas, you know?
Well, right. Because like, just to be a UFC fighter in general, it's like John Jones, right? Like you see like an absolute killer. Like, I mean, like this guy's like the most dangerous guy like on earth kind of deal. And it's like, you see what can happen. Same as, you know, guys like Conor McGregor too. These, like as soon as you get that energy to be all in, and in order to do what you're doing, you're going to have a certain type of personality to be in there. And it's like, that is a gift and a curse, but it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing to see people pouring themselves into these crafts. And man, I just have so much admiration for it. Because it's like the purest form. Like, I love real estate, but like, it's not as glorious when I go and close a house. Like, that's great. Me and the clients are happy, but it's like, you go in there and get a job done, and there's just like a crowd cheering kind of deal. And it's like, that is just so cool, man.
It's crazy, man. It's the highest of highs and lowest of lows. That's what I said.
Right.
Not the last fight, but the fight prior to that, you know, was like, I won another title, you know, 4th round knockout, beat an undefeated guy. So like, you know, I'm just glowing afterwards, right? My whole team's glowing, right? My girlfriend, my friends, my family, just this amazing, glorious moment. Everybody's high. Then like my last fight, you know, then I'm getting carried into a bathtub by my coach because my knee's messed up. My face is swollen like a basketball.
Yep.
And I'm just sitting there like, crap.
Yeah.
You know, so just the contrast, man, is insane, dude.
Right.
Insane.
Right. But and anything can happen in there.
I made a post like after my fight. I don't know if you saw it or whatever, but I basically my girlfriend took a picture of me in the tub, and I said what I thought in the moment, but I remember being there and just kind of going through it, right? Like, just like, you know, like what just happened and just on a low. Then I just remember thinking like, man, how many guys have you beat up that were probably sat in a tub somewhere going through the same shit that you're going through, you know?
Yeah.
You know? And it's crazy, man. And I'm one of these guys too, man. Like what you see is what you get or whatever. Like, I consider myself a pretty nice dude, and I like, you know, I'm not perfect by any means, but all in all, I'm a nice dude. And like doing what I do, what I'm getting at by saying that is doing what I do isn't easy. And what I mean is like, you know, like the last guy I knocked out, like, you know, I'm in the moment, you know, it's an amazing moment, jump on the cage or whatever. But like literally like seconds later, man, I'm looking at him on the ground. I'm like, man, you know, like it's this weird thing, dude. Like you're going in there to hurt somebody, but you don't really want to hurt them. At least that's how I feel, you know. Yeah. And I always feel bad. Like, you know, it's a crazy, crazy sport, man.
Dude, you're human. I
think
that's just a human aspect to it.
I know some guys are just like, you know, like, I don't know, just kind of dicks, I guess. But yeah, you know, they talk about like, yeah, I just want to kill a man in there and break a man's skull, and that's not me. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I said, it's this weird thing where I try to look at it as like more like a martial arts competition. You know, I'm just competing against the man. I respect this man. I got nothing against him, right? But what I'm doing is getting locked up in a cage with 4-ounce gloves, and you know, I am trying to do my job. You know,
100%.
But it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
I love it, man, and I love hearing your like unfiltered perspective of it too.
Yeah.
Man, I can only imagine the feeling. Even just getting in there. So you were saying earlier how like some people say like some people might say they're not nervous going into a fight or something. Do you think that everybody probably just has a? I think you have to be insane, and there's probably insane people that do fight. There's probably a lot of them. But you have to be insane to not be a little bit nervous, though, right? You have to be like, because it's like you're always fairly stacked up against someone that's somewhat competitive, because that's part of it too, right? Is like you're getting stacked up against people where it's going to be a competitive bout.
Yeah. Hopefully, right? And unfortunately, in my sport, man, and in boxing, it might even be worse in boxing or any other combat sport. But I don't know, man. I honestly, dude, I think there's a lot of bullies in fighting, and what I mean is that, like, I don't know, man. These guys, what we call is like the padding the records, or they're fighting, they're fighting tomato cans, and what that means is like they're just. I don't know, man. I know guys like, for example, I've met guys that are like 10-0. I'm like, why haven't I heard of this guy?
Right.
Then I get looking at his record, and the guys he fights are like 1-5, 5-8.
Right. And
then
it's a bunch of other people you don't know.
Or you'll be like, oh, but he fought a guy who was like 3-0. Then you click on this guy, and this guy looks like he, should be delivering milk, all due respect, but just does not look like an athlete whatsoever, right? So,
right.
So I understand like building a young fighter, right?
Yeah.
So like, maybe give him a couple cans, if you will. But eventually you gotta take a risk, man, and like why else? You know what I mean? Like I don't know, man. Some of these guys are just
like, why else are you doing it, kind of deal, right?
Some of these guys are just pathetic, in my opinion, man. It drives me nuts. Like just like don't want to, they're just beating up like lesser men, if you will, and they jump on the cage, and it's like, bro, like,
right?
Come on.
Do you get a say as the fighter in? I'm sure you must get the final say when it comes to who you're fighting.
Always.
Okay.
But
there's only certain opportunities that come up too, right?
Yeah. But that said, like that's why the UFC, is really the most legit, man. It's because like although you can still say no to fights, how do I say it? Like it just doesn't look good.
Of course not. Of course not. Right.
And that's why like the UFC is so legit, because like that's the beautiful part about the UFC, man, even compared to like boxing and stuff. Like at the end of the day, man, for the most part, if you get to the UFC, you're legit, then you're fighting other legit guys. Like the best fight the best. There's always like, maybe there's one guy who got in there through connections or whatever. And then there's some guys that like fast track the title shots and giving good matchups and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, man, 95, even 99% of the time, like the best fight the best in the UFC.
Right. And that's what makes it so damn entertaining.
Yeah.
So damn entertaining. What's one of your favorite fights? Speaking of the UFC, what's one of your favorite fights that you've watched? There's probably a ton of them. Is there one that like you were like that was
one that stands out? And the reason why it stands out is, well, one, because it was a war, but two, I actually watched this fight backstage before a few of my fights just to get me ready for that, that war, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Chandler and Justin Gaethje.
Okay.
I don't know if you watched the fight or familiar with either one of those guys.
I think I did. I'm trying to remember who won. I don't know if Michael Chandler. Did Michael Chandler knock him out?
No, Gaethje won by decision.
Okay.
But it was just a war, man. It's one of my favorite fights to watch. But yeah, and specifically, like I said, like these guys are beating the crap out of each other. So for me, it gets me ready for like that mindset. And I'm one of these guys too, man. I prep my mind for war. Like a lot of guys, like I don't know, sports psych, blah blah blah. People are different, right? But I personally never go into a fight thinking like I'm just gonna take this guy out quick, right? And I have gone into fights with that mentality. Then it ends up being a war, and I didn't prepare my mind for that, Yeah. So I prepare myself, man. I'm thinking 10 seconds in, this guy knocks me down. I'm a bloody mess. I'm stuck in a deep submission, and I got to work from there, right? I'm getting the snot kicked out of me. There's a minute left in the fight, and I got to pull something out of the gutter, So that's how I personally prepare my mind for the fight.
What was one of your most memorable fights that you would say, like, probably was your what you'd consider the biggest war that you were in when you were in the cage?
Two stand out, but one specifically, it was a war because I actually fought with the flu.
Damn.
And that was like, and it's funny, man, because it was my most boring fight for sure. But for me, it probably meant, one of the most, memorable moments, I guess, because I know how I felt in there. I know, and the guy I fought was like built like this freaking wall over here, right?
It's a stone wall.
Yeah, and so literally, dude, like, not to get too graphic, but I like before this fight, like, I ended up like catching like a stomach flu or something. So, dude, I was like in and out of the bathroom like probably like 10 times before I walked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get out there, I'm like pale as a ghost. I'm looking across the cage.
What a horrible feeling, probably.
I'm looking across the cage. I see this freaking gorilla, right?
Hey, when I'm sick, I don't even want to get off the couch.
Yeah. So, anyways, the fight starts, and like I just run and clinch him because like my legs are barely underneath me.
Right.
And I remember just like being in that clinch like 30 seconds in the fight and just being like I can't feel my legs. And anyways, it was an ugly fight, and I had to fight like a very ugly style, as in like it was like a boring like wrestling kind of grinded out.
Right.
But that said, I like every round, like he probably won the first round, the second round started to take over, and the third round I almost finished him. Like literally like 5 seconds left in the fight, I would, but I broke the man, and I broke the man when I was at my absolute worst. Like it was all heart,
Right.
So for that reason, again, like anybody who watched that fight, most people would be like, man, that was a boring fight. But for me, it meant a lot because I know what I had to go through to get that win, So,
I love that, man. I love that. And even going in there with the flu, starting off like that, like that's got to be a mind fucking itself.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're going in going, shit, I know I don't feel my fucking best and I got to go up against this guy right now and give it my all. Yeah. Give it my best.
Yeah. And like I said,
that's what Tim said, giving 100% all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and that's such a cool story, man.
And that's what, what's cool too. Like, that's what you got to consider, like guys like John Jones, right? Like George St. Pierre, right? I guarantee you, in some of their fights, they didn't feel their best on fight day, right?
Yeah,
whether they're sick, whether they have a bad weight cut, whether they got personal things going on, right? I guarantee you that these guys didn't go into every one of their fights. Matter of fact, they probably gone into like maybe even as far as saying few of their fights feeling their best, right? But that's what's so impressive about like not just world champions, but defending world champions, man, in any sport. But it's like the fact that that they have fought or competed a lesser version of themselves and I've still got it done, That's
such a cool perspective that I've never even quite thought of, is when you're watching these people walk out, you think, okay, this is an athlete at the very top of their level. And it is, but like you're saying, you don't know how they're feeling though. 'Cause it's like everybody wakes up some days and there's something it's like, I'm not 100% today. And it's very rare that you wake up feeling 100%. Those are great days. You'd probably pray that happens on a fight day, but the chances of that are so low. So it's like getting used to just bringing your best all the time is the crazy part.
And it's like you said, like that, and that's just like, like waking up feeling your best. But like, again, there's the weight cut. Right. There's injuries.
There's so many factors.
There's injuries that people hide, right? Like all kinds of things, right? Well, that's why, like me being a fighter, right? Like and like being aware of these things, I guess, like I don't know, man. Like you say a champion has a boring fight or doesn't look spectacular, and everybody shits on them, right? Yeah. That's what like a lot of fans do, right? They shit on guys, but it's
people
like,
start
man,
booing and stuff, right? In the crowd.
Yeah, but it's like, man, you have no idea what this guy is going through, right? And then you could see a guy like, even take a guy like, I don't know, Anderson Silva or George St. Pierre or whatever, right? Like these guys have had like less than stellar fights, right? And then like the whole crowd boos or whatever, but you have no idea what that guy's going through, and especially like a guy like Anderson who's had like spectacular knockouts and he has a bad fight, but like, yeah, man, he could have went in there with a blown out knee and flew and divorced his wife a month before, you know, like you
don't know.
Yeah.
And it's wild too, right? And then people will boo and stuff, and it's like, but at the same time, the people booing, none of them would be the ones in the octagon, and it's like you're the one in the arena, right? When you're the one in the arena, none of that noise matters.
Yeah.
None of that noise matters because the only thing that matters. Can you even actually hear it? Can you hear any of the stuff going on outside? Like, can you hear the cheers? Can you hear any of that? Or are you just dialed into like your coach? Like,
I'd say yes and no, and I would say it depends the fight.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of, I'm kind of in and out of it, right? Depends how the fight's going, I guess, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I'd say yes and no. Like, yeah, I kind of remember like bits and pieces, you know. But yeah, it depends. It really depends how the fight's going.
Being so tunnel vision, like just right on the just on your opponent kind of deal, just on the task at hand.
Yeah.
And it probably, because I feel like I've heard some people say they can't even hear the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things like, I don't know how to put it, man. Again, I when you ask me these questions, I think of like certain fights, eh?
Right.
And like I remember like I fought. It was actually my first pro fight. I told you I had like a good fight with Buddy, but it was in his hometown in Halifax. He was a Halifax boy, and people asked me, like the whole crowd was going, Johnny, and that's the guy I'm fighting, right? And people asked me, did that affect you? I was like, no. You know, like, as in, like, I don't know, man. As in, like, I don't know. Maybe some guys would get affected by that. But in my opinion, if you're a fighter, man, and you get, you know, butthurt by people cheering the other name or booing you or whatever, you probably don't belong in the cage, man.
Right. Cool. Because I've seen you go into a couple fights because you fought over COVID before, too.
Yeah.
And there was, so I think, yeah, there was probably a couple fights you did where there was like no crowd at all almost, right? Where there was
just the one.
Was that just the one? Where was that? Was that Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Philadelphia.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Philly. Right. Yeah. Right.
But yeah, that was actually like, although it was a small venue and it was during COVID, there was still like a crowd, but it was like weird. You remember how COVID was?
Yeah. Just completely. What a weird few years.
Yeah, weird to say the least. I was very vocal on my thoughts during that process, but yeah, I fought a guy, Basil Havez, who's in the UFC now, and it was still like his hometown, and you know, people cheering his name, but it doesn't affect me, man.
No.
Like, again, if you're affected by boos and cheers, don't get me wrong, I love like when people cheer me, and you know, but that said, if that's like, I don't know, man. If that's if that affects you winning or losing, you probably shouldn't be in there. You know what I'm saying?
Like, it seems like some guys, like, let's say for example, like I feel like Conor McGregor, that guy feeds off the crowd. There's some guys that like feed off that, right? Yeah. And it's like, I feel like if you put him in a situation where there wasn't much of a crowd, it's like, would he do better if there was? And there's probably some fighters that are like that, right? That feed off the energy, or do you think that that's just a perception that maybe someone like me has?
I think
as a spectator,
having the crowd is a big factor, right? And you heard a lot of guys actually complain about like fighting at like the Apex, which is where I just fought, right? But just because there's no crowd, and
there should be a crowd.
It kind of like goes with the show, right?
Right.
But that said, for me, I don't know, man. I guess I just have this mindset that it's just like, doesn't matter, man. We could fight right here, or, you know, we could fight in, you know, Madison Square Garden or whatever, right? I can't let that affect
100%.
You know what I'm saying?
100%.
So,
oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Right. It's right, because it's all up here. Because now if you're allowing an external factor to control the way that you're going to fight, that's not a good place to start at all.
And you know, like, I've heard like sports psychs talk about this, and I've heard fighters, but like, and I used to kind of be this way, so I can relate, but like, you know, I don't know, man, you got like this pre-fight ritual, and you wear your lucky underwear or something, you need to do this and that, and I try to stay away from all that stuff now,
Smart.
Because I for me, that's like mental weakness, you know, because it's like, you know, if things don't go your way, you know, like you're like spooked out or whatever, you know, now it's I'm literally just like, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah, no superstitions, Yeah. So I want to talk about this just for a second. You did for a while, I think it was probably during COVID, you had some time off, I think, from what I was seeing, and you were out lobster fishing for a while. Talk about hard work. That's a dangerous career in itself. So I'm really good friends with one of my best friends is from Graham and Ann. He grew up in Graham and Ann. So then I was always around a lot of his lobster fishing buddies who at like 19 were just making the most amount of money of anybody I knew, especially on Graham and Ann, because they make a lot of money over there compared to like, let's say like PEI lobster fishers.
Yeah.
How long were you doing that for?
I did 2 full seasons.
2 full seasons.
Yeah. So I did a summer up in Niguac, which is a tiny town near Miramichi, but that's actually where my family's from.
Okay.
Originally, like my grandparents. And then I did a season on Deer Island.
Okay.
And I might actually, depending on how my knee goes, but in 4 weeks the fall season starts. And like last year, I was a helper. So the beginning of the season, like they just need extra guys because there's so much lobster coming in. Yeah. So I'm kind of like a spare guy. Right. So I might do that again for like a week or two, coming up in like a month.
Right.
But
I'm sure like anybody would want you on their boat. Like somebody with like as much determination and grit. Like, yeah, get that guy on my boat. We're gonna be reeling in some lobster.
Yeah. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I would say I'm a pretty solid worker, and especially at the beginning of the season. So like, this is where we unload and load the traps, right? So I'm like primed and built for that stuff, So.
Right. What's dangerous too, man? That's because it's dangerous work. Like. Yeah. When you're on the boats, just being on the water. I worked as a commercial diver for a while, so I was for about a year. So I went to school for that in PEI in Holland College, and then I worked around Graham and Ann a little bit around here. But like, just being on boats in general, like the ocean is obviously a crazy spot to be. But then you're adding in the fact of like throwing the traps in and stuff. Like I know. Yeah, I just know it's like that's another thing that just takes grit too. That's and that was an interesting thing to see.
Chest, man,
I'm like, what a maritimer thing to do! What a maritimer thing to do, kind of out there. Like, and do you think that like could have helped you at all, maybe, or was that just kind of something to stay dialed in, or maybe just kind of a change up?
I think so, man. I don't know if you know me, but I'm all about this guy.
Yeah. Yep.
So I kind of believe that everything happens for a reason,
100%.
And for me, whether you're religious, whatever, for me, like take Jesus, God out of the equation. Like for me, it doesn't make sense to not look at things that way. Yeah. And what I mean is like, you can either be a victim or you can look at this happened. What's the good in it? Why did it happen? You know? And that's really what it boils down to, So in my situation, like the pandemic happened and I couldn't fight for that reason. And but I always wanted to fish. Like it was always a bucket list thing of mine. I come from like a long bloodline of fishermen.
Yeah, okay.
And anyways, it was always a bucket list thing of mine. And for me, it's just like everything happens for a reason, right? Like I just had like this window where like for the first time pretty much in my adult life, I wasn't an athlete. And I pursued, another kind of passion of mine that always kind of drew me in. And like you said, man, fishing's hard work, bro.
Oh, yeah,
I'll tell you
that.
My first week fishing, like my first season, I was sore in places I didn't know I could be sore. And this coming from a professional fighter,
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing, man. That's why I respect any man in their profession, first of all, but especially when it comes to labor, bro. Like, because like, even like take like scaffolding, man. Like, I'm sure if I did a full day scaffolding, I'd be sore in places I didn't know I could be sore.
Man, 100%.
Right? It's
even like farming kind of deal, right? Like just anybody that's doing that stuff, like it's like people don't give enough credit, and that's where like the farmer strength comes from, right? Like Definitely. Just grabbing like hay bales and like lifting and manipulating big animals and pushing on them, and just like it's 100%, man. It's like there's so much respect you got to give to people that are doing those, plumbers, welders. Yeah. I've done a little bit of welding. That's a crazy craft in its own.
Yeah.
And like talk about like you're just literally working with steel all the time. Like that's like some of the best shape I got into is when I was welding, because I was lifting steel and working with steel all day. And then I went back to the gym, and then I was working out with a buddy of mine, and like pretty well we were just lifting steel all the time. And within like because I went out to Calgary and came back, I probably put on, geez, almost 10 pounds of muscle in like 6 months.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. And
came back, my dog didn't recognize me. My dog was barking at me for like 15 minutes. Like, who's this guy? Who is that?
That's funny. Yeah, man. But that's the thing, right? Like you go to the gym, right? You look like you go to the gym. So.
Yeah. But I have to, just to stay dialed in, like just to make me feel better, I have to work out. And I don't know if it's something with, I joined the military at 16 years old. So there was just always this drive to do. It's like, we had PT, there was always something going on. I think from a young age, I grew up skateboarding on the east side. Like, there's energy inside me that if I don't burn it, I start to feel like the weight of the world is crushing down on me if I don't exert an immense amount of energy every day.
Well, good for you, bro. And I really admire that. Like, you having a profession that isn't like, we'll call like isn't health oriented, but you know what I mean? Like you're not working like a labor job or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I admire that because like there's a lot of men out there who like, you know, do something like what you're doing or work a desk job or whatever. And they're like successful, but you know,
but they're not in shape, or they're
putting, you know, directly like they look like bags of milk, you know?
Right.
And
man,
at the end of the day, and I'm sure you can speak about this firsthand, but if you're healthy, it is going to improve everything else in your life. You going to the gym, a lot of people might not see it or whatever, but I guarantee you, and I'm sure you agree with me, that it makes you a better entrepreneur and a better real estate agent.
100%, man.
Because your hormones are dialed in, right? There's so many factors, right?
It's funny because when I first started in the kind of entrepreneurial real estate gig, like I didn't put my health as a priority. I put my survival in business as a priority. Like I need to get a deal. I need to get business. And it wasn't until I started to put my priority of health first that I actually started to grow in business. And what I realized was my energy changed. I was showing up in the world with a better energy, and it was starting to radiate. And it's like, there's a real frequency that comes off of you when you are in a good spot and when you're taking care of yourself and when you're healthy too, right? It's like, so now, I mean, I don't like to judge people, but you have to look at how somebody, like the way that we walk around is like a resume, right? Like I can look at you and it's like, you know that you are a athlete, you know, just by looking at you, you know that you understand long-term gratification of putting the work in, of consistency, because like it's showing on you. Like it's literally like it's not easy to build muscle like that kind of deal, right? So you're walking around with that resume, and first impressions do matter. And people say they don't judge. Everybody judges. It doesn't matter who you are. Everybody's judging you. You have to. It's a human instinct. People are judging each other all the time. They say, "Oh, I don't judge anybody." You're saying that, but your mind's doing it because there's no, what's your brain doing when you're looking at people?
And there's difference between like judgment as in like, I don't know, as in like, I think I'm better than you, whatever.
Right.
But there's, like you said, there's that natural judgment of just like, again, we're human beings, man. And this is your meat vehicle, you know?
Right.
This is how you present yourself to the world. And not only that, not only like, you know, I don't know, man, spiritually, energetically, whatever you want to call it, but like again, like working out, being fit, eating healthy, all these things, right, is going to optimize your hormones, which just makes you quite frankly better human being.
100%, man. Right? And it makes you better for the relationships you're in. It makes you better for your friends. It makes you better when you're interacting with people. And it's like, I'd rather be healthy than be successful. Being healthy is success to me. Like it's like showing up and feeling good. That's more important than having a huge bank account, right? Doing things that you enjoy doing are more important. And then it's like, once I started focusing on this stuff, it just radiates and it actually helps you do better in life. Like how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So it's like, if you're not taking care of yourself, like what else is going on behind the scenes that you're not taking care of? Because I can see, like if somebody like visibly, and there's a ton of people with issues and different types of things that don't allow them to work out. I'm talking about people that are able to work out. Which everybody seems to be like, everybody could probably do something, right?
100%.
Everybody could probably do something to some degree.
And
it's like,
I got to flip the script too. just so like, I don't know, just to put on the other side. Like, that said, I do think that, like, especially now with social media and stuff like that, man, but like, you can be all about working out per se, you know, and you just become like this narcissistic kind of meathead douchebag.
Right.
You know? So like there is the other side of the spectrum, right? That I think that needs to be acknowledged, because there's some people that are all about, you know, the gym life, whatever, but they're just like, I don't know, man, kind of like, how else do you put it? Just kind of like crappy humans, you know? And at the end of the day, you know, like, yeah, like there's a lot more to life than being healthy and fit. But that said, it's a foundation.
100%.
You know?
100%. It's a good foundation. It's a good place to start. And then so for me, it's way less about like how it makes me look. That's just that's an after effect of it's my mentality. And I find I just work best if I'm able to get a good exercise out in the morning. Is that when you work out? Do you work out in mornings, or does it fluctuate for you?
It fluctuates. To be honest with you, I'm not much of a morning guy anymore.
Yeah.
And again, like, everybody's different, right? So I used to be like a LeBron James kind of guy or whatever. Is that was it him or
Kobe Bryant?
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe
So I
Bryant,
always get the two confused.
Yeah. I'm not a basketball guy, by the way. That was just a story I was telling. It's probably like him and LeBron James. I couldn't name anybody else.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't watch basketball.
Yeah, me neither. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, I used to be a guy, man, who like needs to, like, I'm up at 4 a.m. I got to do this. I have my protein shake. I got to do this, that. And I recognize that, like, that's actually toxic for me. Everybody's different. Yep. Everybody's different, right?
Yep.
But it's something that, like, so we were going to talk about like adrenal fatigue and stuff.
Yeah.
I've been burnt out, bro. So anybody that says overtraining isn't a real thing.
Right.
You just haven't been there.
Right.
That's all I can say. And you know what? I'm sure it happens to people. Like, that's why you hear people going like stress leaves and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I really think, like, so, and something that I've been educated on for a long time is like stress is stress. Yes. Whether it be training, whether it be fighting with your wife, whether it be, you know, work, whatever, right? Stress is stress. But like, yeah, like burnout is a real thing, man. And I can tell you, like, I have spent like a month in my bed going through shit, and I could barely go for a walk around the block because I was so exhausted. And that's real. So
do you know the signs now? Do you know the signs, or is there things that you're doing, let's say diet wise or supplements, to kind of like try to mitigate some of that?
Yeah, all of these things are factors, right?
Okay. Like I've heard potatoes are good to help your adrenals.
Oh yeah.
Is that something you heard?
No.
Okay, cool.
But that said, you know, like, I really, again, it goes back to like that subjectiveness, right? And at the end of the day, man, we're all different. We're all different physiologically, and we all have different lifestyles, right? Yep. And I guess one of the things that I've really dialed into now is just like you said, like, you know the signs, and that's what I try to be aware of, right? And I still go over that line sometimes.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. But that's the competitive edge. That's that all-in mentality.
Definitely, and that's the toughest part being an athlete, man, and especially a fighter, right? Is that like
pulling back and like, realizing when you gotta slow down. Yeah.
Because like you're always thinking like, that guy's training, that guy's trying to kick my ass.
I gotta do more.
I'm sitting here, I'm doing nothing, right? So that's the demons you gotta fight off. But again, experience, right? I'm 32 now. I've been doing this a long time, but like, it's all about quality over quantity now, right? And it's just trying to stay like within that threshold. And something, I don't know who I heard this from. I think it was like one of the UFC like PI strength conditioning coaches, but he said something along the lines. He's like, listen, everybody who gets to the UFC trains hard, right? You don't get to the UFC unless you train hard, for the most part, right? Yeah. The best are who train the smartest, right? And that's so that really like, that really clicked with me, and it was just like, now I'm all about quality over quantity, right?
I think I heard possibly Conor McGregor's coach on Joe Rogan talking about like, you don't want to go 100% in the gym every day. You almost want to go to like 60, 70, but do that on a more consistent basis. And then eventually that compounds. Instead of going like 5 days, 100, and then you take 2 days off or something, like And then I was like, oh, that's an interesting mentality instead of, and that was something I had to learn even just running, even learn to run long distances. I was like, I thought in order to get good at running, I just had to go out and push myself. And I literally for about a year ran till I puked all the time, just until I was throwing up, and then I'd keep running. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I must be doing good. I must be pushing my body enough now. Yeah. But I realized that that's actually not good. No. And I wasn't building any endurance from that. And actually what helps you build endurance was like running for a long time slow. And it's almost like this weird like shuffle. I'm like, this doesn't even feel like a run, but this is how you do it, I guess. Yep. And it's like learning to hold back a little bit to go farther, right? Like taking a step back to go 5 steps forward.
Yep. Yeah, and again, like I keep saying this, but I think it's subjective too, right? Like you really, you go through trial and error, and but that said, I mentioned I've been to a couple of like the best gyms in the world, and I see how guys do it, and it's interesting, man, because I find with fighting, it's like it's split halfway in the sense that like some guys are taking a much more scientific approach, right? Like just like, everything we talked about, rest, recovery, right? Yeah. Then there's the other side that are still like at the best gyms in the world, man, that are still like, oh, you just train hard all the time. You like feel bad. You train harder. You got a broken leg. Right. That's the time you got to push harder, So like, yeah. But that said, man, like you listen to like Khabib. And like he talks about like, I just train all day, train,
Yeah.
And he did what he did, right?
Yeah.
But there's other guys
Wrestling
that are
bears.
Yeah. But so I've been on both sides, right? Yeah. And I know that when I just train hard, train through the pain, I just end up sick and injured. Every time without fault, right? Every single time. Then I look at it like...
Because then it's like the immune system gets shot, right? Is that what happens? Then the nervous system,
everything gets shot, bro. And like, it took me, it took me a long time to figure this out. But like, I notice when I go to big gyms, it's like, I'm getting progressively worse when I'm there. And what I mean is like the first week, and this is just the honest truth, like I can hang with a lot of the best guys in the world. Second week, it's getting a little tougher. Third week, I'm like an average guy in the room. Fourth week, I might as well not even be there. And what I figured out is like, I'm doing this, right? Because I'm not recovering in time. You know what I'm saying? And that's partly my fault too, right? Because when I go to big gyms, my mind says like, I gotta soak it up. I gotta do all the classes. I gotta do all this, Yeah. But yeah,
and then also getting the most out of it, going to these big gyms. I want to get the most out of this experience. Yeah. So I want to be as present as I can all the time. So we were just talking about the big gyms you're going to and going hard when you're at these big gyms, and then how that adrenal fatigue will kick in. And you said you were starting pretty well, like at the top of your game, but you notice the harder you're going at these big gyms, then it'll slowly start to decline. So like, how do you manage that effort input? Because it's like you want to bring your best, but then how do you make sure that your best keeps showing up? Yeah. That's a balance.
I know a lot of guys like who use like heart rate monitors now and like the Aura Ring and stuff like that. I've kind of played around with that, but honestly, for me, it's just kind of like overwhelming. As in, like, I'm not a big techie guy, and I don't like making things complicated. I'm a very meat and potatoes kind of athlete.
I like that. Oh, it's working, man.
But that's what works for me. That took me a long time to figure that out too, right?
Yep. But don't overcomplicate it. Simplify success.
So now, like I told you, I'm a big like studier of the game, but I also like I write down pretty much all my workouts during the week, how hard I pushed.
Okay.
Right. So I like, the weeks until like I started to crash. So again, man, I'm like a mad scientist of this, right? I've got a lot of like personal data now, and I've got a lot of information based on this, So and also, man, this is where like the perks of being in a small town works, as in like, how do I say this? Like, my coaches work with me. And what I mean is like, again, people will like take this maybe the wrong way. Like, I don't want people to think like I'm like surrounded by like yes men who aren't pushing me or whatever, right? Right. But at the end of the day, right, again, I'm 32 years old. I've been doing this forever. I've got a bunch of pro fights. I know myself, right? So like, for me to go to a gym, a big gym or whatever, and the coach is just telling me, like, if I'm like, hey coach, I don't feel good today, like, can we, like, just go light? And he's like, no, today we push, and I'm like, I recognize that that's just not good.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if I'm working with a coach and they're like, hey, Friday, Christian, like, we're going hard on Friday. Okay, I can prep for that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I'm not a believer in training hard all day, hard every day anymore, right?
Yep.
And I believe in training smarter, not harder. And don't get me wrong, right? I say this, I train like a maniac.
Right.
And anybody who sees me train will tell you that, right? So I'm speaking very humbly right now.
100%. 100%. And because you're talking about you're talking about not going hard for you, which, like, your standard is way above anybody else's. Like what you'd say is not going hard would probably make me puke.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And it's also like, say, so this is where you minimize the risk, right? Because at the end of the day, we're training for fighting. So it's very dangerous, right? So, like, for like a coach to tell me, like, no, today we're going hard wrestling, where I'm like, coach, man, I feel like a 3 out of 10 today. So it's like, now I'm just gambling, right? I could do this session and, just get through it and just pray that nothing bad happens. But the reality of it is, I know I'm prone to injury. I'm run down, right? So, like, what's the point, right? What's the point where
the
we
ROI
could just
on it, the risk versus reward kind of deal? What's the return? What's the return on me going all out on this moment?
Exactly, right. But unfortunately, when you're at big gyms, again, there's all kinds of perks of being at big gyms.
Right,
I'm not just shitting on big gyms because I'm a small town guy or whatever, right?
Yep.
But yeah, that's like the bad thing, I guess, about being at big gyms is that, like, you're just another body in the room, Yeah. So, like, you do what coach says, or maybe you're just, they don't care about you per se. They've got like other guys at the top, and it's like, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a heck of a sport, man. And again,
what's one of your favorite gyms you've gone to? What's one of the favorite big gyms you've gone to where you had the best experience and probably had the best training session, do you think, when you were going away to train?
You know what, man? I can't pinpoint that because I feel like I've taken something from all the gyms I've trained at, right? That's
an even better answer, yeah.
Pros and cons, and like, yeah, I've taken something from every single gym I've been at. And what's cool is that, like, for example, I've been at City Kickboxing, which is like where Israel Adesanya trains. I've been at like Rufus Sport, where Anthony Pettis trains. I've been at TriStar, where George St. Pierre, train. And they all do things differently.
Right.
And this is where things get messy too, man. And this is what, like, again, I coach like kind of like my young fighters and guys that are under my wing. Like, I'll have like world champion kickboxer telling me, like, this is how you throw a hook. Then other world champion kickboxer says, no, that's not how you throw a hook. This is how you throw a hook. So that's where things get messy too, right? You get world champions completely contradicting each other. And then it's like, well, who am I to say that either one of these guys are wrong? And again, that's what's cool about where I'm at in my journey, is that, like, again, I'm kind of like a vet now. And now it's more so like, what is Christian good at? And let's make those things better, And that goes back to the conversation that we had earlier about, like, George St. Pierre and stuff, like, he's got a deadly jab and a double leg. He's going to do it. Still jabs the shit out of everybody and double legs everybody.
Masters it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and there's so many factors, right? It takes years to figure that out. Body types, like, there's so many factors, right? And that's why, like, a lot of, like, the young guy that I'm kind of coaching is like, like, I want to see, like, how does he move? What does he like to throw? I always ask him, like, do you feel comfortable doing this, right? Because a lot of coaches get, like, very dogmatic and, like, no, you got to fight exactly like this, and this is how we do things, right? And I've been around the block so much that I know, like, well, again, man, you just see, like, the contrast in world champions all the time, right? Like, there's no, like, one style. you know, especially in a sport like MMA where there's so many different styles, right?
Right.
But
it's literally called mixed martial arts.
Yeah. So and there's so many factors, man.
Right.
Personality, body types, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I like that you said the people that you're like kind of looking up to for inspiration to are normally people that have a similar body type, because that's important as well, right?
For sure.
Like, you know, it's like me even working out. It's like, who do I want to look like? Well, if I look at someone like The Rock, I'm like, well, I'm not built like that. I'm not 6'8", whatever he is.
Yeah.
It's like, I look at someone like Mark Wahlberg. I'm like, that's a realistic possible build. Right. Somebody similar to my size kind of deal, right? Yeah. So it's always, and it's funny actually that you said that too, because like, I even searched for that in business a little bit. Do you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
I'm like,
I followed him for a long time.
Me
like
too,
I was really
man.
into him at one point. Yeah.
Me too. And I went to a conference about 6-7 years ago now, and it was in Toronto, and Gary was one of the head speakers.
Cool.
And this was when I was commercial diving, and he was one of the first entrepreneurs that I found. I was like, man, I feel like that guy's got a similar energy to me, and if he can do it, I'm like, I feel like I could do something like that. I could, and it's like finding people. I think that's a huge self-awareness thing, is finding somebody that's like you who's done it, right? And then it's like, if they can, then you're similar to doing that. So that was a really cool kind of reference you made there. So being from St. John, being from the port city here, is there certain spots that you like to go to, Christian, to say like decompress? Is there certain spots around here? Let's say you want to decompress. You want to maybe just get the mindset right. Is there certain spots that you like to go to around here?
Well, luckily for me, man, I'm like kind of an introverted guy, and I love nature.
Yes. Yeah.
So like, I love it here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And what I mean is, there's all kinds of spots I like to decompress.
Yeah.
I'm a big like nature hiking guy, you know, so I can't even pinpoint just one. That said, at like my backyard, there's pretty much a bunch of trails, so
nice.
I spend a lot of time in there. But yeah, it's funny, man. When I was younger, bro, and this might be a little off track, but
no, go. Yeah. We're open to whatever.
All I wanted to do was like be in a big city. And I moved to Montreal, and I lived at the TriStar dorms for a while where George St. Pierre trained. And after like tasting that, man, I love the small town. You know, I love it, man. That's a big reason why I'm here too, right? It's because I love the energy and I love the community, bro. Like when you're in big cities, like it's funny, man. Like even being in Vegas, dude. Like I was actually in Vegas when I was like 19, and I was just walking around the strip, like wow, you know. And I never want to leave.
That's all Vegas is wow, all the time.
But that
it's like built for wow.
That said, being 32 now, and like I said, Kelly and I went to the strip. I was like, man, this place is the freaking devil's playground, man. Get me the hell out of here.
It's like soul sucking, right? This is a soul sucking.
Don't get me wrong, it's cool to see or whatever, but like.
Not healthy though. It's not healthy.
Oh no, man!
You can't spend too much time there.
I don't drink.
Right.
You know, I don't gamble. So you know, So, but yeah, spinning back to your thing, man. Yeah, I guess it boils down to like, I love the small town, man. I love the community. I love, you know.
I love that you said that, because it's like you have the perspective of living in Montreal. You have the perspective of a big city. And it's funny because I feel like I was similar growing up in St. John. You hear everybody kind of complaining, right? Oh, we're in the armpit of Canada, you know, nothing here. Like people kind of like downplay it. So you're going, well, everywhere else must be way better. Everywhere else must be way better. So about 8-9 years ago, maybe now, I was like, I want to experience something different. So I went out to Calgary, and that's where I was out there welding. And I drove across Canada to go do it. So like that was a 3-day drive, driving through. And at the time I'd travel quite a bit with the military, but I got to actually live in a big city. And the same thing that you thought, man, I thought I was going to love the big city. I showed up first week, you're seeing all these like real nice cars. There's a lot more money. You're like, oh, this is exciting. But then like you try to have a conversation with somebody on a subway or on a bus, and they're like looking at you like, don't talk to me. And you're like, oh, people are way less friendly here. You hold the door for somebody, they're like snuffing you off, and it's like, I'm not built for this environment. I'm not built for this big city lifestyle, walking by everybody like they don't exist, not acknowledging another person because somebody could be trying to scam you or rob you, or God knows what's going on in these big cities. But everybody's like protected and like very like closed in. I'm like, I'm not built for that, man. And that made me have such a larger appreciation for St. John and for being close to the ocean and being close to all the nature trails that we have. I'm like, there's actually a lot of beauty here. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a real estate agent selling real estate here. This is where I grew up. And I'm like, I'm so glad that I left, because you have to leave to really understand what we have here. And to kind of answer my own question with what I asked you, one of my favorite spots, man, is going to like St. Martin's.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Going by those caves and just looking at the ocean. And it's like, this is almost like, if you just stand on the rocks and just look out, it's like, this is untouched land. Like, you can't really see anything from there. And it's just the waves coming in. And you got the ocean right there. And you got the caves. And it's just like, this is a spot I like to come and just like, if I ever get real stressed out, I'll drive out to St. Martin's. And it's only happened a couple times where I'm like, I feel like I need to go. But I love it, A, because you lose service. Yeah. So you lose the cell phone service. So it's like anything that's going on in this device just, goes away for a minute, and you're just with nature. That's got to be one of the best things for the soul, man. And we have so much of that around here.
I was going to say too, man, I've had so many moments like that, like being at the caves or whatever, but just like going to so many cool places, man, that I'm like, I've had so many moments where I'm like, man, people around the world would like pay thousands of dollars to just be here right now seeing this, Right. And again, it's so easy to like be here and take everything for granted, you know? But I guess, man, I would relate that too to like I'd spin that full circle into like when you say like a lot of people like complain about being here, like it's the armpit or whatever. And like, yeah, I see that too. But I would actually like say like that's also like a lifestyle thing, as in like it all spins full circle, as in like if you're healthy and you do things and you want to explore more and do shit like that, right? But it's like, yeah, like, and that's really what it's about. And that's, and I might be a little biased or whatever, but I think, like most people, man, are just like, so caught up in BS, man, and the dopamine's all messed up, and
I think
chasing things that don't matter.
And I think what you're talking about is perspective, right? Is people's perspectives off. And it's like when you leave and go do a little bit of traveling, even if it's just going to see another city or like book an Airbnb or something, like just to experience something outside of St. John. And I find anytime I travel, I always come back and I feel like I have more perspective, right? And it's like going to places and just, even being in Vegas, and it's like, okay, like now I have a little bit of perspective of like, this is the way that like major entertainers were raised. And I was thinking of Elvis when I was there. Yeah. I'm like, this place is like, this is where Elvis was kind of born. Guys like Frank Sinatra and stuff, right? Like have these big stories in places. And then you come back and it's like, what a crazy lifestyle. But I wouldn't trade that life for what I have here. Like, it's like this, and it just makes you appreciate what we have here. And I find that perspective, just stepping out of it and actually experiencing other places. And like living in Calgary, there's no water really nearby. On a hot summer day, you got like the Elbow River there, which there's not much you can really do in there. It's like glacier water, so it's kind of cool. It's like bright blue. But it's like, you want to go cool off in a lake, and we have so many lakes, so much ocean here. And like, this is stuff, like you said, man, people pay thousands of dollars to come to, and we have it all literally just surrounding us all the time. Yeah. We have the highest tides in the world. It's like it's like a huge phenomenon, and we all just drive by every day, reversing falls. But like, people come here on boats, and then they just like look at it. People just sit by the bridge looking at it. Like, there it is, the highest tides in the world.
And man, there's things like, I got a buddy of mine, and he's like, he knows everything in New Brunswick, I guess, man. He's like a super hiker. The guy like travels the world and hikes everywhere. But anyways, he's very like educated on like this area too. And he's brought me to like waterfalls, like, in Sussex, man, that are just like ridiculous, dude.
Breathtaking,
and
kind of deal.
Like something that you'd see in friggin' Costa Rica, and being like, again, like these hidden gems that like nobody knows about, but it's like, again, I've been to these places and be like, man, people would pay thousands to be here right now,
Right, and it's even cooler being like, this is like 45 minutes from where I live kind of deal, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's what I mean.
And it's so tucked in and so remote and like untouched too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it's a national park or something. Like, this is just somewhere that anybody can go visit if they knew about.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there's a website of like waterfalls in New Brunswick, and like they're all rated and stuff too. there's so much that people can explore. And it's funny because it's normally the people that aren't even from New Brunswick that come here and start exploring, because the people that are from here take it all for granted. It's sure. It's like there's a guy on YouTube, and I think he moved from Ontario with his family here, and like he started doing like some posts about St. John, and I'm watching it going, oh, his perspective is so unique. He has so much appreciation for things that I never even thought to appreciate here. So it takes that outside perspective, right, man? And that's a big part, I think, of appreciation. Is realizing your perspective. Let's land this. Let's land this plane, dude. This has been amazing. You and I feel like could go on for a long time here, and we can do it again too. But I want to end with this question, though. What would be some advice that you'd give to young aspiring fighters in St. John growing up here and that want to do something similar to what you've done, that want to make it to a level you've made it to, Christian? What would be your advice to young fighters in St. John?
First and foremost, it comes down to hard work, man. And then, like, you know, that sounds simple. But, you know, it's not about outworking people. It's about working way, 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 way harder than everybody else, you know? And it might sound cliche or whatever, I don't know, but it's like like I mentioned earlier, like when you're an adult human, man, like just to survive, you got to work hard, right? Like I'm not denying that people working 40 hours a week at a job, whatever job, right? That's not hard work. Yeah. But again, that's just required, man. Like, you know, what do you expect to just, you know, sit on the beach sipping margaritas? Like, do you think that you deserve that? You know, I think a lot of people do.
100%,
unfortunately,
man. 100%, yeah.
But that said, yeah, man, like by way, way, way harder, it's like, are you going to bed early? Are you not partying on the weekends, right? Are you working? Then after work, you're tired, you know, you go home, you could smoke a J, you could eat your box of Cheerios, or are you eating a healthy meal and going to the gym, coming home and sleeping at 9 o'clock, waking up, doing it all over again? You know, like, to put in perspective, you know, I was a bouncer for a couple of years in my 20s, you know, so I would train all day, all night, whatever. Then on the weekends, I was pretty much babysitting other adults, you know. That's right. What it felt like, you know.
100%, yeah.
But yeah, man, and like, you know, people may look at me or whoever now and like, you know, right now I don't work, but like I have worked full-time jobs and I still train 2-3 times a day, you know. It took me a long time to get to where I'm at now, and I'm not saying, you know, I'm at the pinnacle or anything, but yeah, man, you got to work way, way, way harder than you even think. And the second part would also be to believe in yourself. But that said, I always put the way, 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 way harder first, because, you know, as you probably know or whatever, there's a lot of like influencers out there that are just like, oh, you just got to believe, right? Just believe in yourself, you know? And I think like, yeah, it's huge. You got to believe in yourself, but believe in yourself based on the ridiculous amount of work that you put in.
Yes.
So I'll say that.
That is a wicked way to end it, man. Because without the work, you can believe all you want. But, you know, it's like people saying, oh, you got lucky. Like luck doesn't happen. Luck's just is when hard work meets preparation. That's luck, right? So, Christian, this has been amazing, man. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, man. Good time.